Rise up and rebuild, restoring what was lost. Life has a way of knocking us down. We face failures, losses, and seasons of brokenness that leave us questioning whether we have what it takes to start over. But the truth is, God is in the business of restoration. He takes what's broken and makes it whole. He takes what's shattered and rebuilds it stronger than before. When we look at the story of Nehemiah, we see a blueprint for how to rise up and rebuild, no matter how insurmountable the challenge seems. Nehemiah's journey shows us that with God's guidance, determination, and faith, we can rebuild not just walls, but lives, dreams, and futures. A call to rebuild. Nehemiah's story begins with heartbreak. As an exiled Jew serving as cupbearer to King Artaxerxes in Persia, Nehemiah learns that Jerusalem, the city of his ancestors, is in ruins. Its walls have been torn down, and its gates burned with fire. For the Israelites, this wasn't just about physical destruction, it was a symbol of disgrace, defeat, and vulnerability. Nehemiah could have shrugged it off. After all, he had a comfortable position in the king's court, far removed from the devastation in Jerusalem. But Nehemiah's heart was burdened by the brokenness of his people. He wept, fasted, and prayed, seeking God's direction. Here's the first lesson we can learn from Nehemiah. Rebuilding begins with a burden. When God places something on your heart, whether it's the restoration of a relationship, the revival of a dream, or the rebuilding of a community, He's calling you to take action. The power of prayerful preparation. Before Nehemiah picked up a single brick, he spent time in prayer. In Nehemiah 1 verses 5 to 11, we see his heartfelt plea to God. Lord, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying. Nehemiah's prayer wasn't just a cry for help, it was a declaration of trust. He acknowledged God's greatness, confessed his people's sins, and reminded God of his promises. When we face the daunting task of rebuilding, we must start with prayer. Prayer aligns our hearts with God's will, gives us clarity, and invites His power into our efforts. It's not just about asking for help, it's about anchoring ourselves in His presence and promises. God equips the called. When Nehemiah approached King Artaxerxes to request permission to rebuild Jerusalem, he was taking a huge risk. Speaking out of turn or making a bold request could have cost him his life. But Nehemiah's confidence didn't come from the king's favor. It came from God's provision. In Nehemiah 2 verse 8, we see the king granting Nehemiah everything he asked for, because the gracious hand of my God was on me. This is a reminder that when God calls us to rebuild, He equips us with what we need. It might be resources, opportunities, or people who step in to help. Whatever it is, He doesn't leave us to figure it out alone. Rebuilding amid opposition. Rebuilding is rarely smooth or easy. Nehemiah faced fierce opposition from people like Sanballat and Tobiah, who mocked, ridiculed, and threatened him. They questioned his motives, doubted his ability, and tried to stop the work at every turn. But Nehemiah refused to be intimidated. In Nehemiah 4 verse 14, he rallied the people, saying, "Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your families, your sons and your daughters, your wives and your homes." When you're rebuilding your life, whether it's after a financial setback, a broken relationship, or a personal failure, you will face opposition. Sometimes it's external, criticism, doubt, or discouragement from others. Sometimes it's internal, fear, insecurity, or the voice that whispers, "You're not good enough." In those moments, remember Nehemiah's words, "Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome." Keep your focus on Him and let His strength fuel your determination. The beauty of community. Nehemiah didn't rebuild the walls of Jerusalem alone. He rallied the people, assigning each family a section of the wall to repair. Some worked with tools in one hand and weapons in the other, ready to defend against attacks. They worked side by side, united by a common purpose. This teaches us an important truth. Rebuilding is a team effort. God designed us for community, and when we face challenges, He often works through the people around us. Think about the times in your life when others have helped you rebuild. Maybe it was a friend who encouraged you when you wanted to give up, a mentor who guided you through a tough decision, or a church family who prayed for you in your darkest moments. If you're rebuilding right now, don't try to do it alone. Lean on your community. And if you see someone else in a season of rebuilding, step in and offer your support. Together, we can accomplish far more than we ever could on our own. Faith to finish the work. One of the most remarkable aspects of Nehemiah's story is how quickly the walls of Jerusalem were rebuilt. Despite the opposition, the people completed the work in just 52 days. How is this possible? Nehemiah 6 verse 16 gives us the answer. When all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. When God is in your rebuilding process, things that seem impossible become possible. He accelerates progress, opens doors, and makes a way where there is no way. But we must have the faith to finish the work. Rebuilding requires perseverance. There will be days when you're tired, frustrated, or tempted to give up. On those days, remember why you started. Remember that God is with you and that He's using this process to prepare you for something greater. Modern-day Nehemiah's. Nehemiah's story isn't just ancient history, it's a blueprint for our lives today. All around us, there are modern-day Nehemiahs rising up to rebuild what's been broken. Consider the single mother who, after a painful divorce, starts over with nothing but her faith and determination. She rebuilds her life, creating a loving home for her children and finding a new purpose in the process. Think about the entrepreneur who loses everything in a failed business venture. Instead of giving up, he turns to God for wisdom and rebuilds, creating a company that not only succeeds but also serves as a blessing to others. Or the addict who hits rock bottom, only to find God's grace waiting for them there. They rebuild their life, one step at a time, and go on to help others find freedom and hope. These stories remind us that no matter how broken we feel, God can rebuild us. He takes our mess and turns it into a masterpiece. Your turn to rebuild. Maybe you're standing in the rubble right now, wondering how you'll ever put the pieces back together. Let me encourage you. God is not finished with you yet. The same God who empowered Nehemiah to rebuild Jerusalem is with you, ready to strengthen your hands and guide your steps. Start with prayer. Ask Him for wisdom, courage, and clarity. Trust Him to provide the resources and people you need. And don't let opposition discourage you. Remember, the enemy wouldn't be fighting so hard if there wasn't something worth fighting for. As you rebuild, keep your eyes on the bigger picture. Nehemiah wasn't just rebuilding walls. He was restoring hope, dignity, and faith to a people who had lost it. Whatever you're rebuilding, know that it's not just about you. It's about the impact your restored life will have on others. From ruins to restoration. The story of Nehemiah shows us that rebuilding is possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. It's a story of faith, resilience, and the power of God's provision. So rise up, pick up your tools, take the first step. The process won't be easy, but it will be worth it. And when the work is done, you'll look back and see that God's hand was in every detail, guiding you, strengthening you, and turning your brokenness into beauty. Child of God, the ruins are not the end of your story. They are the beginning of your restoration. Trust Him and watch as He rebuilds your life into something more glorious than you could ever imagine.